Hello everyone, welcome to Allied's YouTube channel. Today, we are thrilled to host an inspiring conversation on accessibility in science education with Dr. Michael Fricke, a leading analytical chemist at Olon USA. Dr. Fricke, who was instrumental in the development of Molnupiravir, the first oral COVID-19 treatment, is here to share his journey from groundbreaking medical chemistry to advocating for inclusivity in STEM. Collaborating with Professor Mona Minkara, the founder of Allied, Dr. Fricke crafted a handcrafted Braille periodic table, helping make chemistry accessible for students with visual impairments. This session is about bridging gaps in STEM and empowering every learner. Let us dive in. Hello everyone. Thank you for being present here for yet another Allied event. For those of you who don't already know, I am Farheen Zubair and I'm the project manager for Allied. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Michael Fricke, who is our guest speaker for today. I would also
my good friend and good colleague, and I'm just really happy that you're here.
He's an analytical development chemist at Olon in Ohio. And I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the director of Allied, Dr. Mona Minkara, and also our co-director, Dr. Sandra Scheffelbein. For those of you who don't already know, all of our events are made accessible with ASL interpreters. And today we have Elizabeth and Kinsey assisting us. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Kinsey. They both are nationally certified ASL interpreters. And before we begin the event, I would like to tell you a little about our guest speaker for today. Dr. Michael Fricke is an analytical development chemist at Olon USA, based in Concord, Ohio. He was the analytical lead for the development of Molnupiravir, which was the first approved oral treatment for COVID-19. That is wonderful. And I got to know a little more about that from Dr. Fricke. If you want to know more, you can ask him more questions in between the event. His graduate and postdoctoral research was devoted to the study of arsenic. This work culminated in the discovery, successful synthesis, and then isolation of dimethyl thioarsenic acid. Dr. Fricke is a counselor for the Akron section of the American Chemical Society and member of the ACS Committee for Chemists with Disabilities. Yep. The tactile periodic table project grew from his experience working with two blind individuals as a graduate teaching assistant in general chemistry at the University of Cincinnati. Tactile representations include molecular models, and prime pictures in a flash graphics were instrumental in conveying concepts and reaction mechanisms. Partnering with Professor Mona Minkara, he designed the Braille periodic table, which is in his background. The initial prototype took approximately 200 hours to carve by hand. He's shown me so many other carvings of his by hand. Yeah, it's beautiful, it's handmade. Their goal is to build interest in the project, add automation to the carving process, and provide open source instructions for anyone interested in making an accessible periodic table. Isn't that very interesting and valuable research and innovation? Without any further ado, let me pass it on to Dr. Fricke.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of awesome to get to share something that takes place in my garage. So, so I guess advance to the first slide. So a little bit about myself. I'm a drug development chemist. I work for Olon USA, which is contract research and contract manufacturing. And normally we don't talk about broad antiviral in our shop. It was designed at Emory. And after COVID happened in 2020, it was part of 3,000 candidates that were studied at Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. And it was out of the 3,000 candidates, it had the best response in vitro. So we were super busy for the next year and a half. All the clinical surprise for the world came out of our shop, and it was the first approved oral treatment for COVID. It was eventually purchased by Merck. Merck distributes it now. But a couple weeks after Molnupiravir, which is named after Thor's hammer Mjolnir. After it was approved, it's about 50% effective at keeping people out of the hospital or dying. A few weeks later, Pfizer's Paxlovid came out, which is 90%. So not many people took the drug that we worked on, but still we were the first. Advance the next screen. I need to stop reaching for it. So besides my work in the pharmaceutical industry, I'm very active with the ACS, and I like to talk about arsenic. I gave my arsenic talk earlier today. So we've now created the Cleveland Poison Symposium. We did a symposium on arsenic. We did last year on lead, and next year we're going to talk about cyanide and the 1982 poisoning of Tylenol, which completely changed my industry. We realized that our products could be used to hurt somebody, and that's where tamper-resistant packaging came out. It was the 7 people who died in Chicago. On the other side of the screen is a picture with Melissa Tedoni. She's not a chemist. She's a conservator at the University of Delaware, and her specialty is 200-year-old green books, and they're green because of an arsenic pigment. So if you ever see a 200-year-old green book, put some gloves on it and find out if it's one of these books that can kill you. Next slide. Oh, go ahead.
Why are they green? Like they just were.
So there
Why
was
did arsenic get on these books?
the first real good green pigment that would last through a few washing was a copper acetoarsenite, and it was a very vibrant green. If anyone remembers the avocado green appliances in the 1970s, that trend. In the 1830s, this emerald-looking green was a big hit, and people had it in their dresses, on wallpaper, and in books. It was everywhere. Queen Victoria had it in Windsor Palace and had it removed in 1870. And I could talk about that for the next hour for sure. But we're going to talk about
So they must have been poisoned a little bit.
Yeah, and not only were they poisoned by touching it, some molds could volatilize it, and then you would have sick house phenomenon where people would be sick when they were at home, but if they left for a while, they would get better, and then they get sick when they go home, and it was all because of the arsenic in the wallpaper. Yeah, okay, so this is a picture of the picture in a flash tool that I used when I was teaching chemistry and then later organic chemistry to my blind students. And the way it works is wherever you draw with either a black wax pen or you can print on it, you run it through the heater, and the black catches more of the heat and swells the paper up and turns it into a tactile image. And I got to be pretty good at making these things on these they're notebook sized. Next slide. Here's an example. You can download this and print it out, and it's a butterfly. So it makes a tactile butterfly. Next slide. So I remain friends with my students, and
Are your students still chemists?
one of them is a lawyer, and one of them owns a couple retail stores. But my first student, when he was getting married, he was going to Bermuda for his honeymoon, and he asked me to draw a map of the island and put it through the PF so he could see what the island looked like. And it got me thinking, like, maybe he could see, like, just have a map, and he wouldn't have to have me do one island at a time. So this was a image that was available for download, but it's just not that great. I mean, how do you get the whole world onto one little piece of paper? So next slide. So what I did is I went on eBay and I found the biggest map in the world that I could find, and I bought it. And the seller, he asked me, I found out that actually mailing this is going to cost too much, so I either need to fold it or cut it in half. And I said, that's fine, cut it in half, because what I was planning on doing when I got it, I taped it back together, and then I taped it to these are joined maple boards. And this is about 4 feet wide and 3 foot tall. And what I did was I took a knife and I cut through the map. So I destroyed it anyway. So who cares if it was cut in half? And by cutting through the map into the wood, I transferred the image of the world into the wood. I covered it with pencil so I could see it. And then I went back with a Dremel and grooved it out, made it tactile. Sealed it with lacquer, painted the grooves with black, sanded it, sealed it again, and it was done. So this is my first tactile carving, a map of the world. Next slide. So then I was hooked. Once you make this as a wedding gift for someone, you have to make it for the next one. So my second carving was I work with atomic spectroscopy. I came out of the Caruso group at the University of Cincinnati, and our instrument was the ICP-MS, inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. And the next image I carved, there was a grad student that came before me named Jason Day, and he did this image in Microsoft Paint. Must have taken him forever, but everyone who came out of Caruso's group after him used this image until someone said, "Hey, you can't use that. You didn't make it. You're not giving credit." So after that, the tradition became that everyone slightly modified it so that it was then able to be used. So two of the students that I went to school with, they ended up getting married, and of course, I had to do a carving of the ICP-MS. The plasma at the heart of the instrument is it's a radio frequency generated argon plasma, and it's about 10,000 kelvins, the surface of the sun hot, and that's how you destroy everything and atomize them and ionize it. And that's dichroic glass, which is a glass developed by NASA, and it has an inorganic layer on the back. So it refracts and reflects at different wavelengths, so it kind of shimmers between blue and silver. So I cut that out and inlaid it. Next slide. This is a carving of an alchemist. I made this for myself, so there was no deadline or reason to finish it. So it's been in progress for about 10 years. It's almost done. Next slide. I made prior to meeting Mona, I made 2 tactile periodic tables. But my blind student, my blind friend, told me that he just couldn't read it. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't really usable for him as a reference. But that didn't stop me. I like how it looks. One more slide. This is the second one. This had some color added. Next slide. Besides the woodworking, I don't know if you know about this, Mona. I did a patio in my backyard. So in 2011, Dan Sheckman won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, and I'm always happy when it's not a biochemist who wins the Nobel Prize. Like, they really need their own category. I'm sorry, but he was a crystallographer, and his discovery was five-fold symmetry in crystals, which had been forbidden in crystals. So Linus Pauling, one of the few people to win a Nobel in 2 different fields, he told him once at a conference that, Dan Sheckman, there's no such thing as quasi crystals, only quasi chemists. So he didn't believe it. He thought that he was seeing twinning, but it turns out you can have five-fold symmetry. It's a little bit weird. So this pattern has only 2 shapes. They're big ROMs and little ROMs, and they fit together with symmetry, but they don't have any periodicity, so they don't repeat. I think it's very nice, and so I did a patio with this pattern in my backyard, and CNE News picked it up and published it in 2013. So
You carved that?
I made concrete molds and cast bricks. It took me about 10 months. I like big and complicated projects. Next slide. So through all this, I was very active with the ACS and was the chair of the Akron section for several years. And then our counselor retired, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And that meant I started going to national meetings. And when you're a counselor, they ask you to serve on a national committee. And of course, based on my background, I chose the Committee for Chemists with Disabilities. And after the pandemic, I met Mona at the first conference was in Chicago in the fall of 2022. Next slide. And I found out that the committee had worked on a tactile periodic table before. This debuted in 2019, and it had both the Braille and the sign language on the periodic table. And One thing about it is it didn't have the normal elemental symbol, and that was intentional so that people who would look at it and not be oriented by the symbols would know what it feels like for someone who can't access the periodic table. But one of
And
the
it was
problems
massive.
it was massive.
Like, Too massive.
So the Midland local section of the ACS has this in their meeting room, and it's really too big to move very easily. So it has never left that meeting room since it was created. And that was one of our goals is to make something that could move around and could be used in someone's office as a professional reference. So Mona and I met in Chicago and started talking about how we're going to do this. Next slide. So Mona, every time I mention your name, I feel like I have to mention planes, trains, and canes.
Oh, thanks.
So I point people to you. So if you don't know Mona, and I know we're in Mona's home turf here, but if you don't know Mona, look up her travel blog at planes, trains, and canes.
You're
Next
just
slide.
fine, Fricke.
Okay, so after Chicago, I had never worked with Braille before. I'd never worked above the plane. I'd always carved into the wood. So we started to think about how to do it, and the Braille was easy. They make what's called raster spheres, and that's made specifically for ADA signage. They're 1 millimeter acrylic spheres, and my local section decided to buy a jar of 10,000 of them and tell me to have fun. So we talked about it, and the original idea was let's spell out the names in Braille. And if you look at element 104, this is Rutherfordium. There's 13 characters in Rutherfordium. So I tried to, I was just getting used to it. I tried to write Rutherfordium using a Braille font I got with Excel to make the table. And it was way too compact. And then next slide. And the next thing I found out was that there's very specific rules about how to do Braille and how to space the dots and the balls, and even how deep they should be into the plane, about 40% of the ball. So in order to spell out the names, the Braille periodic table would be about 6 feet wide and probably not fit in my car as well as this one does. This thing does not fly anywhere. I do not trust baggage handlers with it. It's got about 10,000 miles on it between the different national shows it's been to. Next slide. Okay, so sized it out to meet the ADA specifications, and I sent a couple more slides to Mona, including one with your name. So molybdenum and sodium makes Mona. And,
I have them, yeah.
yeah, you have those. Yeah. And Mona really liked the Braille, but I found out that the numbers 1 through 0 are the same as A through J. In order to distinguish them, you have to put the number symbol, which is a backwards L on the screen. So every number starts with the number symbol. But that was the only tweak. And also we moved the atomic symbol. You wanted the atomic symbol above the atomic
rearranged
symbol.
it around a little bit.
So we moved the middle line over into the center of the tile.
Honestly, this was a really fun project.
It was super fun.
Like, so much fun.
So next slide. So I printed the template out on a big sheet of poster paper. The design was actually done in Excel, believe it or not. But once you have the sizing, you can copy and paste. And so I built it out in Excel and printed it out to scale. And same process I've always used. I taped it to the frame. And Indianapolis is pretty close to where I live in Cleveland. So the Committee for Chemists with Disabilities, we turned it into an impromptu tactile art display. And I ended up bringing 8 carvings to Indianapolis and setting them up in our meeting room. And we officially started carving it at the meeting in between the sessions. And then continued in the expo and just started talking to people and talking about the project. Next slide. So that was in the spring, probably March. Just one by one, I went through the elements and carved them with a knife. It took me at least 6 months to get through all 118 elements. This is at my wife's farm, her family farm. Next slide. I would go to art festivals, just set up a table and hang out and carve. And I was invited to some local Northeast Ohio conferences. This is a picture at the May conference with a couple of my carvings in the background. And I just worked on it, started lecturing about it. The students at John Carroll, that's where the May conference is, had some great suggestions. They said, hey, why don't you try a vacuum pen to place the braille? That's what's shown there. It turns out a vacuum pen and epoxy is, a one-time thing. It's much better to do it with tweezers. But they also suggested, next slide, that I visit a makerspace at Case Western University. So this is a 7-story makerspace. There's woodworking and electrical, water cutter. It's actually the largest open access makerspace in the world, and it's right by where I work. So I went down there and I talked to them about laser engraving, and we tried a couple of different tools. The laser engraving, it leaves kind of an ashy texture. It's not really kind of the right tool to do this. Next slide. But they had a CNC router. It's in the back of this picture. CNC stands for computer numeric control, and essentially this uses a CAD, computer assisted design, to use machine tools to carve images. They also had joiners and planers and table saws. So this board was done through a woodworking club, which I didn't have access to anymore. So it was great to have everything I needed in one shop, and essentially like a library that I could use. So the next slide. I also found a machine that they use to make like ADA elevator signage. And this one not only will carve it, but then the robot will go back and pick up a different tool. And that one has the raster spheres in it, and it'll just hammer them right into the holes. So there is technology out there that could automate this completely.
How much is that machine?
6 figures, maybe. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
Um,
And so did you say you put every single bead on with tweezers?
Yeah.
yes,
God.
it takes about
Forever.
15
That
minutes
was
per
easy.
element, which works out to about 30 hours for the 118 elements. Okay, so next slide. So in the meanwhile, I've now carved the image through the template into the wood. I've colored it in with pencils so I can kind of see what I'm doing, and I've started carving it with my Dremel. And this took maybe another 5 months. So the next slide. So this is essentially just the naked wood at this point. So the whole image has been carved into the wood. It's been sanded and sealed with a spray lacquer. The next slide. All right, so the next step is to, for the visual people, is to paint in the text and the lines. So this looks like it was around Christmas. And I was painting at my wife's family farm again. So, next slide.
Where's the farm?
Coshocton, Ohio. So this is what I ended up with when I finished painting all the lines and the text. And it's okay if you get outside of the lines. It's not important at all because remember it's sealed with lacquer, and I'm going to sand it, so then it cleans up real nice. Next slide. All right, so of course I started with number 1 hydrogen. And you can see the jar of 10,000 raster spheres. They're called weeding tweezers. I think you use them for vinyl, or they're arts and crafty things, but they have a very needle nose tip on the tweezer. And what I would do is get a paper plate, mix about a pill size amount of epoxy and a pill size amount of hardener, mix them together with a toothpick, and then just sprinkle some balls into them, and they would land and sit on the top. And then I could pluck them out with the tweezers, and a little tail of epoxy would follow, and I would just shove them into the holes and push down on them. And if you look real closely at the board, you can kind of see the glue on the hydrogen side, but by the time I made it to the Nobel gases, I'd gotten pretty good at it. So it's much cleaner, less glue marks. So next slide. Still this whole time, this is a picture of me at the, I'm going to get it wrong, with the chemical engineers, ISEC, I think.
AIS, oh my god, AICHE.
Yes. that.
I'm like, I go to them every year.
So they have a sticker on there. Oh, there it is, AICHE, yeah. So I've had a cover on it that I use to protect it when it travels, and everywhere I go, I get a sticker. So we already went to the bookstore in Northeastern's on
Do you
that.
like the sticker?
I left a big space for Northeastern because it was such a big part of the project.
Huh.
Next slide. This is at an art show. I tend to live by the philosophy that unexpected invitations are sort of like dancing lessons from God. So if someone asks me, I usually say yes. So I was next to a cigar artisan cigar booth. Carrie Sapello invited me to come to lecture at the Island Conference. This is inclusion in science.
Oh, you're in Princeton?
I was in Princeton. This is a disabilities in science conference. And they had a lot of periodic table work going on with different things with tablets and electronics and even temperature, so that you can see electronegativity by having like cold on one side and hot on the other side. But no one was doing anything like this, so it was kind of exciting. And I got some good feedback. There was a physicist who told me that it was a good first attempt.
Peter Walters?
Yes. So that's good. That's good advice. In truth, doing it by hand, it's not very possible to do it perfectly. But
I think it's awesome.
it is. I'm really happy with it. So traveling around Northeast Ohio and lecturing, I was introduced to the Alliance for Working Together, which is a manufacturing vocational program. And they were really interested in the project, but they didn't have any kind of tools to work with. But they went looking, and the Alliance is up on the lake where I work, but I live about an hour south in Kent, near Kent State University. And it turned out that the best place to do it was at the Kent Roosevelt High School, about 2 minutes from my house. So I went down there and met Mr. Spear, who's shown here in the picture with his machine, and one of his students. Next slide. And I went and presented to his students. These are seniors in high school who are taking this to prepare for a manufacturing career. It's called the Computer-Aided Design and Engineering Technology. And they don't work with any kind of teaching equipment. Everything is full industrial size. And it's a 6-district compact. So instead of 6 schools having 6 vocational programs, they all do it in one space. Next slide. So they kind of adopted us, and they decided to see if they could duplicate the effort with their machine. So this is Mr. Spears with a maple board that his students made. And next slide. So I should maybe make sure there's no volume on. Okay, good. So this was recorded from their computer-assisted design program. It was recorded in a workshop, so it's very loud. But the sound doesn't mean anything. But hit play. See if this works. No, it didn't work. Is there a play?
No, there's no play button.
Okay. Oh, that's right. This is a PDF.
It's just a PDF.
But essentially, the program was written from the original Excel file as a graphic and turned into a CAD. And they were able to write in 8 hours in 8 different segments to carve the entire periodic table. So next slide. So this is the first attempt, and about 6.5 hours into it, the wood is held onto the table by vacuum. There's little holes that pull it down and keep it flat. And the board jumped, and the machine kind of ate it up over by francium. So our first attempt didn't work, but luckily, just like a couch cushion, you get 2 chances. So we flipped it over and tried again. And they changed the program a little bit so that the lines wouldn't be as deep and it wouldn't we're not even sure. We're still scratching our heads why it jumped off the plane. Next slide. But he got it done, and I brought it to Denver where Mona and I and Leo the yak inspected it.
Yeah.
And I'm quite proud to say that Mona liked my carving better than the machine
Yeah, I noticed
carving.
immediately it wasn't as deep.
Yeah. So go back to the next slide if you can.
I went to a yak farm too.
Yeah, we went
With the periodic table.
out of our way to get this picture with the yaks. But so the machine carved one steps us ahead about 150 hours in manufacturing one of these, but it still needs a lot of cleanup. And this one actually probably needs to be touched up by hand. And then there's a walnut frame around this, and all of that has to be done. And I'd like to get that one done together with a third one that I'm going to do at the Case Western Think Box, and then display both of them in Washington D.C. at the ACS. And the idea is
Which ACS is that?
that's the fall 2025.
Oh,
But the idea is that the attendees of the expo could stop by for a few minutes and glue some braille in, and everyone could help work on it
Oh, that's nice.
and spread word for
source
them.
really.
Yeah. But also, I think we're going to the makerspace today to talk about it. I have a parts list if anyone's interested in doing one of these. Next slide. So it's not too much. The wood, the epoxy, tweezers, the raster spheres, it's all about $350 in materials.
And hours and hours and hours of labor.
But
Yeah.
like the makerspace here at Northeastern just got a CNC router table in. It's not even installed yet. I was just reading about it, and they're going to need some kind of demonstration project, right?
It is installed. It's the
Okay.
room that it's in is not open for students yet.
Okay.
There's some
Are you from the
infrastructure.
makerspace?
Yeah, I'm from the makerspace. I'm all
Awesome.
He's gonna be giving you the tour.
Yeah.
We can start with monthly updates, I think, on the project. But really, the final step of this project is to have someone replicate it, because that's what you do in science. Is if you can do it by yourself, it doesn't mean anything. But if someone can duplicate it, then it's out there in the world. So,
I have a
question.
question for you.
Yeah,
So do
one
you
more
think-
slide.
One more slide.
Yeah,
Do you
thank you.
think the machine? Do you think the machines can replace hand carving? Do you think like if the depth and everything is set to like how you do it?
Yeah, it would be like any other manufacturing process. You'd fail a lot until you succeeded. So, yeah, one of the things about being a scientist is being comfortable failing multiple times. So,
That's true.
yeah.
What is your next project after you
Um,
outsource this?
So I've started a new business. I bought an ICP OES, which is an atomic spectroscopy instrument. And in Cleveland, they have a horrible lead poisoning problem because of lead paint in the buildings. It's everyone, of course, knows about Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan, the problem was because of a single mistake, and it was in the water. The lead came from the pipes. In Cleveland, it's a result of 10,000 mistakes. So our incidence of poisoning of children in Cleveland is 3 times higher than it ever was when it peaked in Flint. So it's a huge problem. And the city passed a landmark law in 2019 that all rental properties built before 78, when lead paint was banned in the US, would have to get tested and declared lead safe every 2 years. And the home inspectors that are doing this are sending all the samples to Virginia and or Philadelphia. There's no one doing it locally, so we're hoping to have that up and running next year. So yeah,
So
I'd
you're
like to keep
doing
busy.
that on the side of Olon, or are you doing both?
So no, I'm going to keep my job at Olon. I love what I do. This is kind of more of an organizing. I won't have any day-to-day operation with it.
Oh, I see.
It's considered throughput testing, so the same
Okay.
test over and over and over again.
Not so interesting.
Yeah, I like to do the research and development, new things every day.
And do you have another project for disability?
So,
You're very good at tactile things.
yeah, I mean, I've definitely had some ideas. The physicists, of course, would like to do the quarks and the subatomic particle charts.
Work with Peter Walters.
Yeah. But I'm really, I think, exploring more CNC. I do have a little bit of arthritis in my hand, so it's not possible to do this forever.
You wanted to expand upon that though. So
Yeah.
you can-
Yeah, I think computer assisted the CNC is the way to go with the project, which I'm learning. The ThinkBox has free classes, and so I'm hoping to have one that I've done with a CNC for the Washington fall of ACS 2025. So
Cool.
Will this ever be in market accessible to other people?
yeah, so Mona and I have talked about maybe creating a nonprofit and printing these for whoever wanted them. But we're also going to insist that it's open access, so anyone who wants to make one will share our plans, because there can't be really too many Braille periodic tables in the world. So let's talk about the makerspace.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it.
So yeah, you'll get to tour after
Awesome.
this.
Also, Mona, I brought my drill and some tools to hang it on your wall. So I don't know.
Yeah,
if you
I'm
get
ready.
any permission, or we
This is
should.
gonna end up in my office. This
Yeah.
is where which I'm really honored and touched.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm really, really, really happy. I'm really excited about it actually.
Yeah.
It's been in the making how long now, Fricke? Like
We started in Indianapolis, spring of 2023, and it took about a year to finish it. And so it must have finished shortly before New Orleans, because that's kind of how I operate. I need the deadlines to get things done. I'm a serial procrastinator, and really it's a survival technique. If I did all the stuff I wanted to do, I'd never be able to do anything. But if I only do the stuff that's on fire and needs to be done immediately, then I only do the important stuff. So.
I'm curious how the design process worked. Like you would send her little tiles and she would say, oh, it needs to be deeper, or I need this, or.
Yeah,
How did that
the
work?
very first one, the Rutherfordium, I knew it wasn't going to work, but I just wanted to get kind of used to manipulating the spheres.
Mhm.
And
I have the tiles.
yeah,
You have the ones that were
Like
part of
initially,
the
yeah, and I have
design
the
process.
yeah, I have
That's
the
cool.
molybdenum and sodium one.
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool.
And I would see him in person at ATS, and that's when I'm like, it wasn't that much from my end at all. I was like, I think this, and he's like, okay.
And how is your Braille reading going, Mona?
Oh my God, so much better. No, but
Motivation here.
for everybody who doesn't know this, so even though I've been blind since I was 7 years old, I only started learning to read Braille like 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. And I am now reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in Braille.
That's awesome.
Grade 2, so like, I'm on chapter 2.
Nice.
Like, so yeah, no, but I use Braille now to label simply items and things like that. Like the Braille periodic table is not that hard for me now.
What's scary is I learned Braille doing this, and there were 2 errors in the template. One was a printing error, one was a transcription error, and I caught them both because I was like, wait, this isn't right, and I caught them both.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Good for you.
Can you read it with your fingertips?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
You've developed a sense. That's the hardest part.
No, I think as long as you
Like
can
without seeing it. Like
as
actually
long as
doing
you
it.
can recognize the shape, I think I can figure it out, especially the numbers.
So that was the hardest part for me.
Now, the letter J,
Mhm.
no idea what it is, because there's not a single J anywhere on here. It's the only letter that isn't on
Wait, there's not
There's
a single
not a
zero? It's a
J.
zero.
here. Is it a 0?
It's the zero.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that, but I've never felt it as a J.
Oh.
What is it, number 113? This is nihonium. which was named by Japan, and everyone said you can call it Nihonium, but the symbol's got to be J. But they insisted on an H. So that's the Japanese spelling of Japan is Nihon.
I think one of our online audience, Mingy Lee, has a question for you. You can unmute and ask the question.
Okay, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you fine.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, hello, my name is Mingy, and I feel it's really impressive. One question I have is, I noticed that on this board, some parts of it are being carved in and some parts of it are carved out. Like some of it it's like being carved inside the board, somewhat part of it's outside. Is it a particular design decision or like, are there any considerations related to it? I'm just really curious about that.
So all of it is carved into the board. The only
Yeah.
thing that comes above the plane are the raster spheres, which are carved into or glued into the grooves.
It's the braille.
The braille, yeah.
So only in the braille part is carved out.
Everything is carved into the plane, but only the braille sticks above the plane.
I see. Is it because it's more accessible or like?
Yeah, so you for the braille, you have to feel it above the plane.
Yeah, because I'm also thinking because for the other parts, people can also touch it, right? Why don't you also make other parts also being carving out?
Well, it's yeah. You have to go above the plane. You have to basically glue something into it. You can't. You can't carve backwards. Yes.
I see.
Now you can definitely inlay things, and this technique, or I guess this art form, is called marqueterie, and essentially that's what I'm doing is marqueterie, but everything that would be above the plane would have to be put into a housing for it, I guess. So you would carve out the space for it and then drop it in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I think 3D printing is probably the easiest way to go above the plane, and I know there have been some 3D printing of braille period or of periodic
I've
tables.
designed a 3D printed
Yeah.
braille periodic table.
Awesome, yeah.
But it doesn't feel as nice, you know?
Yeah, good.
I'll show it to you. I have it in my room.
Awesome. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My name is Mackenzie. I'm actually a student of Mona's in dynamics and control. I didn't know if you were going to be here or not, but it's really cool.
Hello, Mackenzie. Thanks for
Yeah. I was wondering, since obviously this is something that's meant to be tactile, what elements of the design went into preventing wear and tear over time?
I mean, so it's wood, so
Single user.
yeah.
Nobody else. Just mine. No, I'm just kidding.
So I guess in terms of long-term care, just a little bit of a damp cloth to wipe it down. I guess you could spray it
You
again.
told me once about the expansion and contraction of the wood.
Right. So like you wouldn't want to leave this in a hot car with the windows up. You also wouldn't want to take it outside if it was, in a humid environment, and then take it out into the snow. So those kind of things. It's wood. You can't see it in the picture, but the way it's assembled, instead of being rigidly held into place, it's kind of floated into place. So I'd encourage you all to look at the back of it, but it's only attached to the frame in two screws, and that allows it to move without cracking. And I learned that from a Mennonite carpenter in Ohio who, the woodworkers like to share their techniques. He builds grandfather clocks, and he's way better than me, but that's who you want to learn from, right?
I love how you learn from the Mennonites and
Yeah.
from the industrial CNC machine.
Oh, yeah.
Like the whole range.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
So we have another 5 minutes before we wrap up the event. If anyone has any other questions or our online audience has any. So thank you everyone. And with this, our next event is going to be on the 22nd of November with our guest speaker being Megan Hoffman, who will be talking about supporting students with autism, ADHD, and dyslexia through accessibility engineering. So see you next week in the same room, same time. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being so patient with us and joining our YouTube channel. We hope Dr. Fricke's insight have sparked new ideas on making STEM more accessible and inclusive. If you enjoyed this session, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're always in the loop for more inspiring stories and discussions. Let's keep working together to make science accessible for everyone. Until next time on Allied, keep exploring, keep innovating.